Imagine that it is a beautiful day at your home airport and you're going to go out and fly around, do some sightseeing around the city, and you're flying along and something just doesn't feel right. Well, that thing that doesn't feel right is the fighter jet that is now flanking your side, and they are not happy that you're there. That's right, you've flown inadvertently into restricted airspace. You thought to yourself, this would never be me, this would never happen. I'm always really careful about checking for restricted airspace on my route of flight, so you don't know what to do next. Well, you're about to find out. On this episode of Aero Exploration, we're going to talk a little bit about restricted airspaces and what to do if you are intercepted. So in this video, we're going to talk about different types of restricted airspaces and what happens if you find your way into those places inadvertently and the next steps for you to take. So every year, more pilots than we probably want to admit unwittingly fly into restricted airspaces. So what happens next for them when a fighter jet or a military helicopter intercepts you? What happens if you panic? Are they going to shoot you out of the sky? Well, here's the truth. It's not as dramatic as the movies are going to lead you to believe, but it's still some serious business. So understanding how to handle this could save yourself quite a bit of heartache. So while this video is meant to be informative, just keep in mind I am not your CFI, so if you have questions about this, consult the regulations, consult your instructor for more in-depth information. This is for entertainment and for information only. So in today's video, we are going to deep dive the world of restricted airspaces and those military intercepts. We're going to talk about how to avoid these situations in the first place, what to do if you are intercepted, and why, even if you're just a private pilot, knowing this stuff can make a lot of difference. We're also going to cover a real-life example, including an incident that went from a routine flight to a high-stakes military response. So, as pilots, we all know the importance of carefully planning our flying. So, I'd never bust a TFR, or temporary flight restrictions for those of you who may not be familiar. But what happens when things don't go as planned? Or you accidentally fly into restricted airspace because it popped up in the middle of your flight? Though rare, it can happen. Okay, so let's start with some basics. Airspace in the United States is a complex mix of various classes of airspace, military operation, warning areas, and many, many more. There's a whole section on the side of sectional flight charts that depict what all these different things are and where you can find them on the charts. One of these areas of concern is that of restricted airspaces and temporary flight restrictions, or TFRs. So a temporary flight restriction is something that can pop up with or without some notice. The FAA issues these TFRs to restrict certain parts of airspace temporarily for various reasons. One of the big ones is going to be VIP movements, whether it's the president or other important political figures in the country, or security events, natural disasters, or even large public events. Those TFRs can pop up in the vicinity of those areas, making that part of the airspace off limits to general aviation. Even less predictable are security TFRs, which can arise at last minute when there's a credible threat identified. There's also those in the areas of natural disaster. So say that you've got major flooding, there are resources that are going to be in that area that need to use that airspace, and they want to keep general aviation out of the way so that people can do their jobs and respond appropriately to those natural disasters. So how can you avoid being caught off guard by one of those pesky TFRs? Well, the best tool in your arsenal is to constantly check for updates. Make it a routine before every one of your flights. Get online, go to the FAA's website, go on ForeFlight, and check for those TFRs. You can also get them through flight service briefings or other ADS-B type apps if you have that capability. This might be the difference between a smooth flight and the potential of an intercept from some very fast fighter jets or helicopters. Another thing that I typically do is I will get flight following from air traffic control, or at the very least be monitoring the frequencies in my area so that if one of these pop up, or if they're talking about you, you're going to have an idea. In fact, in all of my years of flying, there has been only one occurrence that ATC has gotten over the frequency and told us a TFR is about to go active, and that was in response to a natural disaster. There were news helicopters and general aviation in the area, and it was disturbing, the response of first responders in that area. So it can happen that it comes across the frequency, but more often than not, a good pre-flight check of the available resources is going to tell you where those TFRs are. So now that we've covered TFRs and why they exist in the first place, let's look at who's responsible for keeping that airspace safe. And who's going to be the first ones to respond if something does go wrong. In the United States, the FAA and NORAD, they all play critical roles in managing airspace security around the country. The FAA is going to get a lot of requests from all sorts of officials, police departments, local governments, federal agencies, potentially asking for those restricted airspaces for various events like we've talked about. But they don't just take the request at face value. There's a lot of assessment that's going to get done by organizations like TSA, the FBI, and others to ensure that the TFR is even warranted in the first place. Once the TFR is agreed upon, the FAA is going to work hard to limit that impact on general aviation. Now, sometimes that's not possible. There is going to be an impact, especially if you're in a larger metropolitan area and a presidential visit pops up, there will be an impact. But they try their best to keep that in mind. They might adjust the boundaries, they might delay some of the restrictions, or create various cutout areas around specific airports to minimize the disruption. The goal here is to make sure the restrictions only affect those who truly need to be restricted, not everyone who happens to be flying nearby. But what comes next when you accidentally fly into one of these restricted airspaces? Now, my friend Brian Turner over at Just Plain Silly has done some satirical videos of what this might look like, but I want to cover a bit of a realistic approach to what you might expect. It's easy to assume that this is a rare and very extreme occurrence, but every year, pilots unintentionally cause military intercepts. In fact, just in the first 2 months of 2025, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, has responded to over 24 tracks of interest just in the state of Florida. Now with the stage set, let's talk about what's actually going to happen if you're intercepted. Whether this is a fighter jet, military helicopter, or law enforcement aircraft, the procedure is going to be pretty similar. But there are some nuances that you should know. The key to understanding these procedures is recognizing signals and how you can safely respond to them. So while you're flying along, suddenly you notice that F-15 pulling up alongside you, rocking its wings and then turning in one direction or another. Maybe you hear a transmission on the radio, maybe you don't, but it's time to stay calm and remember in-flight intercept procedures. There's a common misconception, probably because of Hollywood, that if a military pilot is going to intercept you, they're just going to shoot you down if you're in restricted airspace, and that's just not the case. The military response is more likely to be very controlled. It's going to be a non-lethal approach to get you out of that restricted area. The first thing you want to do is to stay predictable. So that means keeping your altitude, your heading, and your airspeed steady. Now that you've realized that you've entered this restricted airspace, the last thing you want to do is a drastic move just to try to get out of it. Stay patient, stay predictable. Next thing you want to do is turn to the emergency frequency of 121.5 and try to make contact with air traffic control or possibly those military jets that have intercepted you. But don't panic. You want to acknowledge the fighters, whether this is by radio, and if you can't raise them by radio, you want to rock your wings and then follow their instructions to exit that restricted airspace safely. Now, as you see the military aircraft come alongside you and they're rocking their wings and then making a turn in one direction or another, they're trying to tell you to follow their lead and prepare to change your direction. This is one of the common ways that intercepting pilots will communicate their intent for you. Typically, though, the best response is going to be the emergency frequency 121.5 just to make contact and get further instructions. Now, if you're intercepted by a military or law enforcement helicopter, that approach might look a little bit different. Helicopters may be able to hover next to you where a fighter jet is going to have to keep bypassing you as a faster-moving aircraft. You may also be instructed to follow the helicopter to a destination, as unlike those fast-moving fighter jets, helicopters can afford to go a little bit slower, a more controlled intercept, and sometimes you may be instructed to fly at a lower altitude to a predetermined point, such as an airport or other secure location. So when you're approached, you'll likely hear instructions on the radio, typically from air traffic control or directly from that intercepting aircraft. If you're able to communicate directly with them, that's great. That's going to give you the most clear and calm instructions on what you can do next. At this point, you just need to keep your cool, and you're going to want to comply with their instructions without hesitation. Let them know what you plan on doing, and the last thing you want to do is make any erratic movements like we talked about before. And definitely don't try to outrun a fighter jet or a helicopter. You're likely not going to be able to do that. And you probably aren't going to be able to evade that intercept either. That's when things could escalate unintentionally. Another thing to keep in mind is these intercept procedures are designed for the safety of those on the ground, but also for the safety of you and others in the air. The goal here is not to intimidate or scare you, but rather ensure that you're safely guided to another location or that a potential security threat is neutralized. But by being aware of these restricted airspaces and having a basic understanding of procedures, you can avoid that stressful and dangerous situation. So let's take a moment to talk about a real-life case that highlights the importance of military training and the role of the intercept. In this case, a Cessna 172 was stolen from a Canadian flight school. The pilot had made his decision he was going to fly into U.S. airspace. And what followed was an intense and somewhat dangerous situation. Fighter jets were scrambled to intercept the aircraft, but rather than shooting it down, these jets followed the Cessna for hours. The pilot would eventually land in Missouri after running out of fuel, and they safely escorted him and he was taken into custody. This incident proved how effective training is in preventing escalation. The fighter pilots knew exactly what to do even in a high-pressure situation where they didn't know what the pilot's intentions were. They responded without lethal force, demonstrating the critical role training plays in ensuring that airspace is secure without causing unnecessary harm. For many years, the Civil Air Patrol has been a key partner with the United States Air Force and others in conducting intercept training. Experienced Civil Air Patrol pilots and ground crews will come together, coordinate with officials with the United States military and NORAD, and fly certain profiles that are designed for them to be intercepted by these military aircraft.
Gap 834, mission base.
First intercept at 1400, conversion coming up behind 322.
Traffic, 7 o'clock, low, less than 1 mile.
Left POI. And I copy our intercept was at the top of the hour, and sounds like ops normal.
The Civil Air Patrol Cessna 182s give the military pilots a platform in which to intercept and practice their own maneuvers. This partnership has been incredibly beneficial for the military, gives them an opportunity to sharpen their skills with aircraft that are going to likely be in the profile that they're going to be intercepting. While the military does conduct these training missions on a somewhat regular basis across the country, it's something that does show up more prominently before major events come to a certain community. It's important to get those pilots up to speed with the airspace that they're going to be working with before the big day. So if you're like me, flying can be one of the most peaceful experiences that you can have. But it's important to remember that you are not alone up there. Whether it's navigating restricted airspaces, understanding TFRs, or just be prepared for an intercept, it's always best to be informed and prepared. A little knowledge and preparation can go an awful long way in keeping you safe and avoiding those unexpected encounters. Well, I hope today's video has helped you understand the importance of understanding restricted airspaces and the military intercept process. Stay informed, stay calm, and just keep flying safe. Before you go, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and share with your fellow pilots. Leave a comment below if you have any questions or experiences you might want to share, and I'll be sure to get back with you. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Aero Exploration.